in a town called Warren Point, and every Saturday at 11:30 we do a live story time session here on Facebook. And our bookshop Fairy Belle has written us another letter, and she's also given us another tale to read by Beatrix Potter, of course. But before we are going to move on, I would like to talk about one of my passions or one of my hobbies. I love old books, and that's why I wanted to show you this antique edition of The Tale of Samuel Whiskers by Beatrix Potter. Now, this edition is actually from 1926, the very first publication of the tale, the roly-poly pudding, it was originally called, was published in 1908. So this is a later version, but it's also a first edition because the publishing house changed the title and the format of the book. So that's why this book is very special. And I sort of found it one day, and I didn't really know that it was a first edition, but I'm going to show you this page here. This sort of gave it away. Just in case, if you have an old edition of one of the Beatrix Potter books, this little page tells you that it's a first edition, so it has to look like this. And you can see that this book has been, read a lot of times. It is, it shows a lot of tear and wear. But that's sort of what I love as well. I love to think about who read this book, who bought it for the first time, who read it for the first time, what countries was this book in, what bookshops. And I think if books could talk, they could tell us so much about people and the past. But yeah, unfortunately they can't talk, at least not without a lot of fairy dust. But I just wanted to show you, that's one of my passions. So we're going to move on, and we're going to read this week's letter from Belle. This week it's silver. There you go. Dear keepers of the magical world of books, how are you, my dear eager readers? How many books have you read this week? I think last Saturday I didn't give Madeline enough magical fairy dust for our reading powers. I had planned to read 1,000 books this week, but Rupert the cat stole my comfy reading armchair. Well, he didn't really steal it, but I'm telling you, Rupert can sleep for days without moving. He made himself a comfy bed on my armchair, and he snored so very loudly. I had nowhere else to read. So Mummy sprinkled some fairy dust around, just to make sure that you and I would keep the world in books alive. I'm sure a lot of fairy dust reached you too. And then she had a truly marvelous idea. A book nook. Yes, a red-tastic book nook. We built a little book nook at We Bookworms. Wait, what? You don't know what a book nook is? A book nook is a little reading corner with loads of comfy cushions, a reading light, and a jug of delicious marmalade and mustard hot chocolate. Marmalade, mustard, hot chocolate. In the end, I almost caught up with my reading plans, and I read 999.9 books. Do you have a book nook at home? If not, you should make yourself one. You can even send me a picture, as I would love to see them. Just message or post it to the We Bookworms page. As you might remember, last week I completely forgot to tell you about what happened to the most beautiful book in the world, its Ring, Rupert the cat, or Rupert the careless cat, the humans in the bookshop, and Finn and I. Whew. You can't remember the beginning of the story? No problem. I will tell you what had happened. My little brother Finn and I found the most beautiful book in the world in the Fairy Kingdom's attic, just above We Bookworms. I poured some super sparkly fairy lemonade over it, and the book became alive and ran away. It ran and jumped all the way from the attic to the bookshop's window display. It wanted to give us its precious ring as a present for waking it up from its very long sleep. But Rupert, the careless cat, ate the ring because he mistakenly thought that it was delicious cat fluff. The most beautiful book shouted in horror, my ring, my precious ring!" At first Rupert the cat couldn't care less about the angry most beautiful book. But then the shop's doorbell jingled and the sound frightened him so much that he jumped up like a kangaroo, but only once. Then Rupert started coughing as he usually would do when he had eaten extra fluffy fluff. Yuck! The shop's doorbell jingled because 2 humans, a mummy and her daughter, had walked into the bookshop. Yes, as the bookshop custodian, I should have locked the door, but there is a big, huge sign that says closed. Humans simply never read what's in front of them. The humans stared at us in disbelief. Their eyes were wide open. "Lucy, did this book just talk?" asked the mother. And Lucy asked, "Mummy, are these real fairies?" Just then, the precious ring emerged from Rupert's mouth. It was very slimy and covered in cat fur. The most beautiful book couldn't be happier. It danced around singing loudly, it's back, my precious ring, it's back, my precious ring." Finn and I looked at each other. "We need to do the magical remnant spell," I said. The remnant spell makes humans forget what they have just seen. Now, just so that you know, my dear readers, normally we don't use the remnant spell when humans see us fairies. We love when humans believe in us. But when humans see a talking book, now that's a different matter. Books could tell you the biggest secrets of the magical world, and they simply talk too much. Magical secrets need to stay magical secrets. Basta! We took our fairy wands out of our pockets and powdered some fairy dust over them. "I'm ready," Finn said. Finn pointed his wand at the little girl Lucy, whilst I pointed mine at her mother. Together we said, "Remberius planado puff!" The humans froze and didn't even blink. I picked up the slimy ring and put it in my pocket, and the most beautiful book ran away back up into the attic, and Rupert didn't move. He enjoyed the warm sun that was coming through the shop window far too much. After about 10 seconds, the humans woke up from their daydream and looked around the shop in confusion. "How did we get here?" Lucy asked. And then they saw us fairies fluttering in front of them. We gave them a quick tour of the peaceful bookshop. They were delighted, of course, and promised us to come back once the lockdown was over. Later that day, the most beautiful book packed up his belongings from the Fairy Kingdom's attic. It said a cheerful thank you and goodbye to us, and then it went on its way to the Fairy Library, where it now resides in a special fairy book collection. As of the ring, well, we still have it. It is a truly sparkly ring, but we don't know what to do with it yet. Perhaps it will guide us to our next adventure. Well, you will hear all about it next week. So talk to you soon, your Belle. Kiss, kiss. There you go. Oh, and of course we've got our fairy dust here to spread the magical reading powers. Are you ready? That was quite a lot this time, yet again. And let's see, what tale are we going to read this week? Oh, I really like this one, The Tale of Two Bad Mice by Beatrix Potter. And perhaps you've got a dollhouse at home, so you might like this tale, especially if you have a doll's house. So let's have a wee look. Once upon a time, there was a very beautiful doll's house. It was red brick with white windows, and it had real muslin curtains and a front door and a chimney. It belonged to two dolls called Lucinda and Jane. At least it belonged to Lucinda, but she never ordered meals. Jane was the cook, but she never did any cooking, because the dinner had been bought ready-made in a box full of shavings. There were 2 red lobsters and a ham, a fish, a pudding, and some pears and oranges. They would not come off the plates, but they were extremely beautiful. One morning, Lucinda and Jane had gone out for a drive in the doll's perambulator. There was no one in the nursery, and it was very quiet. Presently, there was a little scuffling, scratching noise in a corner near the fireplace, where there was a hole under the skirting board. Tom Thumb put out his head for a moment and then popped it in again. Tom Thumb was a mouse. A minute afterwards, Hunca Munca, his wife, put her head out too, and when she saw that there was no one in the nursery, she ventured out on the oilcloth under the coal box. The doll's house stood at the other side of the fireplace. Tom Thumb and Hunca Munca went cautiously across the hearthrug. They pushed the front door. It was not fast. Tom Thumb and Hunca Munca went upstairs and peeped into the dining room. Then they squeaked with joy. Such a lovely dinner was laid out upon the table. There were tin spoons and lead knives and forks and 2 dolly chairs, all so convenient. Tom Thumb set to work at once to carve the ham. It was a beautiful shiny yellow streaked with red. The knife crumpled up and hurt him. He put his finger in his mouth. "It is not boiled enough. It is hard. You have a try, Hunca Munca?" Hunca Munca stood up in her chair and chopped at the ham with another lead knife. "It's as hard as the hams at the cheesemonger's," said Hunca Munca. The ham broke off the plate with a jerk and rolled under the table. "Let it alone," said Tom Thumb. "Give me some fish, Hunca Munca." Hunca Munca tried every tin spoon in turn. The fish was glued to the dish. Then Tom Thumb lost his temper. He put the ham in the middle of the floor and hit it with the tongs and with the shovel. Bang, bang, smash, smash! The ham flew all into pieces, for underneath the shiny paint it was made of nothing but plaster. Then there was no end to the rage and disappointment of Tom Thumb and Hunca Munca. They broke up the pudding, the lobsters, the pears, and the oranges. As the fish would not come off the plate, they put it into the red-hot, crinkly paper fire in the kitchen. But it would not burn either. Tom Thumb went up the kitchen chimney and looked out at the top. There was no soot. While Tom Thumb was up the chimney, Hunca Munca had another disappointment. She found some tiny canisters upon the dresser, labelled rice, coffee, sago, but when she turned them upside down, there was nothing inside except red and blue beets. Then those mice set to work to do all the mischief they could, especially Tom Thumb. He took Jane's clothes out of the chest of drawers in her bedroom and he threw them out of the top floor window. But Hunca Munca had a frugal mind. After pulling half the feathers out of Lucinda's bolster, she remembered that she herself was in want of a feather bed. With Tom Thumb's assistance, she carried the bolster downstairs and across the hearthrug. It was difficult to squeeze the bolster into the mouse hole, but they managed it somehow. Then Hunca Munca went back and fetched a chair, a bookcase, a birdcage, and several small odds and ends. The bookcase and the birdcage refused to go into the mouse hole. Hunca Munca left them behind a coal box and went to fetch a cradle. Hunca Munca was just returning with another chair when suddenly there was a noise of talking outside upon the landing. The mice rushed back to the hole and the dolls came into the nursery. What a sight met the eyes of Jane and Lucinda! Lucinda sat upon the upset kitchen stove and stared, and Jane leaned against the kitchen dresser and smiled. But neither of them made any remark. The bookcase and the birdcage were rescued from under the coal box, but Hunca Munca has got the cradle and some of Lucinda's clothes. Cradle? Sorry. She also has some useful pots and pans and several other things. The little girl that the doll's house belonged to said, "I will get a doll dressed like a policeman." But the nurse said, "I will set up a mousetrap." So that is the story of the two bad mice. But they were not so very, very naughty after all, because Tom Thumb paid for everything he broke. He found a crooked sixpence under the hearthrug, and upon Christmas Eve, he and Hunca Munca stuffed it into one of the stockings of Lucinda and Jane. And very early every morning, before anybody is awake, Hunca Munca comes with her dustpan and her broom to sweep the dolly's house. There you go. I really like this one. It's a bit like, it reminds me a little bit of Toy Story. I don't know, just a wee bit. So, yeah. Oh, I think Belle just whispered into my ear. She would like to say thank you very much for listening. And yeah, we hope to see you next Saturday again. Have a lovely week. Bye bye.